Welcome to this live feed, wonderful people. Hoping everybody is very well. This evening, or this morning, or this afternoon, wherever you may be in the world, we are speaking to rejection. We are speaking to the emotional and psychological construct of rejection and how it feels to be rejected. What can we do about feeling rejection? How do we mitigate rejection? Why does it make us feel the way we do? And what role does it play in our lives? Deeply important. Now, if you're just coming on, I had issues with the comments last time I had a live feed a couple of days ago. There was something wrong with Facebook. So if you are on, please let me know that you're here. Place a number 1 in the comment box and perhaps an emoticon to let me know how you're feeling. I can see the comments are starting to come through. Natalie, I'm well, thank you. How are you? Good. It seems to be working. Claudia, hello, thank you. Okay, that's good. So it was a glitch last time, and we're back on with the Facebook side of things. Wonderful. Okay, that's good. Magdalena, welcome. Okay, can we all please welcome Magdalena? This is her first time here. So welcome to the community, welcome to the tribe. Hoping you're very well. We're speaking to a pertinent subject matter this evening. We are speaking to Ari, hello, how are you? We are speaking to Susan, hello, to rejection. And particularly, I'll make a reference to rejection in various areas of life, of course, but we're going to bring this down to relationships and how rejection affects our relationships, how it influences our relationships, and it influences the way we feel about ourselves, our self-worth, our value, the way we then project into the world, and how that affects our sense of value, our sense of self-esteem as well. So we're going to go fairly deep into this and learn some very practical tools in how to deal with rejection. Of course, when we feel rejected, when we deeply feel rejected, it's more than just using some tools to allow us to feel differently, to equilibrate the way we're feeling within ourselves, to create a harmony within ourselves. But it's a starting point, and with any starting point, it gives us an opportunity to grow. It provides us with an opportunity to know ourselves just a little bit better. And in that knowing, in that connection, in that feeling, in that moving through, what generally happens is we develop an insight into our own selves. We develop an insight into how can we be different? How can we behave different? How can we embody something different in order to provide us with a different result in life? And that result, or that embodiment, experience, is more aligned with health, is more aligned with our values, is more aligned with our purpose, is more aligned with our authentic, true self. And that's the power that we find in allowing these emotions to move through us. And rejection, or the perception of rejection, brings up an array of emotions that allow us to connect to ourselves better. Essentially, that's what rejection has a tremendous capacity to do for us. And the reality is there's no worse feeling than rejection, but rejection is a nasty feeling. It's a tough feeling to deal with. Whether it's in a relationship, or whether it's in the form of relationships or intimate partnership, intimate relationship where we feel rejected, potentially from friends or our peers, our family members, our co-workers, even society, even when we feel rejected for the behaviors that we express, or even the belief systems and the values that we hold that may go against the grain, that may go against the norm. And that feeling of rejection is so isolating. It's so deeply devolving, almost like we feel so disconnected from self when we experience rejection. We feel so isolated when we experience rejection. And it's a sad feeling, and it conjures up and it brings up a lot of old stuff in us. And when I say old stuff, I'm talking about wounding and trauma and pain from the past. And when we look at life, and this is not to simplify life in any capacity or to reduce life or to reduce our experiences in any capacity, because our experiences hold tremendous value for how we move through the world and who we are. But when we look at life and we begin to understand our childhood, we begin to understand our upbringing and what we experience during our formative years, we can at times, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, narrow down our experiences or our negative experiences, our maladaptive coping strategies to a very few core fears. And rejection is one of them. Rejection is one of those core fears. And it can really debilitate us. It debilitates us from taking action. It debilitates us from stepping into our power. Having a fear of rejection debilitates us from expressing our authentic truth because we fear rejection. What generally happens is that rather than being ourselves, we may feel that we are going to be judged. We may feel that we are going to be hyper-critiqued. We may feel that we are not going to be accepted. Acceptance is social acceptance is a huge part of rejection. We'll integrate and intertwine this as we keep going. But the fact that we may not feel accepted means that we refrain from expressing our true selves. Now, what happens is that compounds, the effect of that compounds. And we then become this fallacy. We then become this fracture. We then become this broken version of self because we choose not to express ourselves in fullness. We choose not to be this grand version of self because we're really occupied and dictated by fear. Now, if you've been there in your life, place a number 2 in the comment box. If you've experienced this in your life where you have refrained from expressing an aspect of self or your own core truth because you've been too scared of what the outcome or the repercussion may be for being you, place a number 2 in the comment box. I know I can definitely put a number 2 in the comment box. I've definitely been that person in my life where I have feared rejection, or I've feared not being accepted, and I've feared the fact of I may be isolated and I may be shifted from my core social group. I may be shifted from my core social peer group. And that has affected the way I choose to behave. So rather than expressing my true feelings or my true authentic self, what I've essentially done is just gone along with the status quo, even though I haven't necessarily agreed with that value set or with those value sets. And that becomes a really sad place to be. And let me tell you something really clearly here now, that this is common practice for so many of us. This is social common practice where people will be so disjointed and so disconnected from themselves that they don't even know what is truth anymore. I got lost in this paradigm of not even knowing what is my true self. What is my true version of self? What do I really value in life? What do I really believe in? What do I really hold true to me? And do I even have the courage or capacity to express that? And the reality was I did not have the courage or the capacity to express that. And I did not express that. Fear of being shamed, fear of being isolated, fear of being ostracized, fear of being pushed out of the in-group and into the out-group. And that fear of isolation can really grip us tight where we become paralyzed. So the feeling that our presence is not wanted or no longer welcomed in the groups that we value most, in the social groups that we value most, where we may experience a lack of social cohesion, it can cause us to feel hurt and deeply, deeply defensive as well. So again, I know in my life that I have in my own life, and this is really interesting, because I'm sort of thinking as I'm talking here, that in my own life, what I'm thinking about actually, as I'm jumping here from thought to thought, is I'm thinking about observing the people in my life as well and how they've behaved in the face of rejection, and how they've then interpreted that rejection and brought that onto themselves and how they felt about that. But in my own life, what I was saying was that the defensiveness that takes place. And the defensiveness for me, and due to my own upbringing, my own interpretations of the world, rather than being very passive and isolated, which I've had that tendency to do as well, as become really recluse, I have retaliated. In the best, sometimes they say that in sport, the best defense is attack. So I've attacked. So I've attacked those that I love before they have an opportunity to potentially attack me. That's how gripping the fear is. That's how deep the fear is for us. Yeah, it really, really takes over us. And it takes over us to such a point where we lose control of our own faculties. We lose control of our own emotional selves. And if you've been there, especially men, and there's a couple of reasons for that: biological, socio-cultural, familial, societal norms, etc. But especially if you've been there, place number 3 in the comment box, where you've really lost control of your emotional faculties because the fear, the unconscious fear, has gripped you so hard. The unconscious fear has gripped you so much that instead of observing your fears, being with your fears, being connected to your fears, moving through them, observing them as something of great value, what you've essentially done is just said, fuck this, I'm not interested in even experiencing this fear. Before I even get an opportunity to taste it, I am going to be deeply, deeply defensive, and I'm going to attack whatever I need to do in order to maintain self-preservation. And if you've been in that space before, you know someone that's been in that space before, place number 3 in the comment box, and importantly, maybe share your experience, or share your experience of knowing someone that's been in that space as well. So the first thing we need to understand is that, so let's look at when we do become rejected, or when we perceive rejection in our lives. We have to understand that it's not necessarily personal. Now, let me just place a caveat here, and something really, really important. This does not mean that that we are not responsible for our choices, and that we are not responsible for the decisions that we make, and we're not responsible for our behavior. So we are very responsible for our behavior. We are very responsible for the choices we make. We are deeply responsible. We must take ownership for the way we behave and act. Now, what this means is that we may act violently or aberrantly, that we may act in a way that really pushes other people away, that allows them to feel rejected. Now, ultimately, again, we must be responsible for our own responses to life and the way we react to life, the way we respond to life, rather, because reaction is very unconscious, response is conscious, it's well thought out. There's an integration of the PFC, the prefrontal cortex, with the rest of the brain, the limbic system, and the brainstem and the cerebellum, etc. And the brain begins to work in a greater integration in unison when we are in a responsive state of being, which means our behaviors are more aligned, they're calm, they're passive, they're observant. When we are reactive, we're coming from a place of unconscious fear, we're coming from a place of survival. The PFC begins to shut down and it ceases to really analyze, observe, be creative, ceases to interact and integrate with the remainder of the brain, and we become isolated and fragmented, not only in our brain physiology, but also in our behaviors. And essentially, we self-sabotage ourselves, and Emma's just made a mention of that. So beautiful. Thank you, Emma. Synergies, same pathways, beautiful. So this becomes problematic because we lose connection with our heart. We lose connection with really speaking or communicating from this place here, because we cease to be able to see and observe with clarity what is actually occurring in our environment and how the other person is feeling. So in other words, we lose connection with our empathetic nature and our compassionate nature. Now, when we are perceiving rejection, we have to understand that the majority of the time it's not personal. And it only seems that way because of how we look at it. It only seems, it seems that rejection is our fault because of the way we are observing, the way we relate to rejection, yeah? There's always something to learn from every situation. We can always grow from every situation. I'm not necessarily going to justify the actions of people, because we can't do that. We can't justify the actions of people when they cause malice or hurt, or even when they hurt other people unknowingly. That's another conversation for another time, but we're really going to bring this back to self because this is really important, yeah? So when we bring this back to self, when we begin to observe people and how they behave and how they treat us, there's something that we can learn from this. There's a way that we can grow, always. And there are other times in that situation, in the circumstance where we're being rejected, that we must ask ourselves, well, how can I move from this? How can I develop from this? How can I accelerate my own evolution from this? And asking that question is really a starting point for us to begin to shift the way we perceive ourselves and to begin to shift the way we view ourselves in terms of our own self-worth, our value, and the presence that we bring to this world and the presence that we bring to our loved ones and our beloved. So I'm really going to speak to rejection in intimate relationship here, but I want to lay some foundations first, which are really, really important. People sometimes will reject us for the behavior that we exhibit. So we have to look at ourselves. We always have to look at ourselves as a starting point. It's so important to look at ourselves as a starting point because sometimes we just will make people feel uncomfortable. We will make people not want to be near us, and therefore they may move away from us. Now, they may move away from us not necessarily because only of our behavior, but because our behavior triggers something within them. See, we're almost co-creating in this world. See, a neuron cannot exist without another neuron. Bear with me for a moment. People don't exist without people. We are responsible together for the way we move through the world at some level. And there are so many levels to life. There are superficial levels to life that move to greater depth of life. So we're talking to the various bodies that exist in our lives, okay? So, of course, I'm not saying that in any capacity are we responsible for someone else's malice? Not at all. Definitely not. But what can we gain from that? What can we learn from every experience that we move into life with? That's the important question to ask. What can we learn? And just to ensure as well, am I behaving in accordance with my moral standard? Am I behaving in accordance with my values? We begin to ask that question. We begin to change the way we view the world. We begin to change the way we interact with others as well. So when people feel uncomfortable, they're instinctively going to want to prevent themselves from experiencing annoyance or irritation or that discomfort. People don't like discomfort, full stop. We just don't like discomfort. So the obvious solution is to remove themselves from our presence. So we have to understand that's a real possibility. And we may feel rejected in that moment. But are they really rejecting us? Or are they rejecting perhaps our truth, our expression, the message, the pertinence and the potency of what we are expressing? Are they rejecting their own fears? And in order to avoid is the key word here, those fears, what do? They move away. So are we really being rejected? This is important, yeah? There are so many behaviors that make us, that make people feel uncomfortable, including when we are negative, when we throw our complaints onto others and loved ones, when we act needy, when we become egotistical, when we are perhaps argumentative or defensive, when we're being overly critical and judgmental of other people, when we don't seem to be able to connect to others. This places people in a position to want to move away from us. And we need to understand the power of that. Or we need to understand why people may do that. So again, using ourselves as a starting point, addressing our own behaviors as a form of introspection allows us to discover what is really motivating others to be uncomfortable and potentially move away from us. And also what is motivating us to behave in the way that we're behaving as well. And if you can begin to resonate with that, place number 4 in the comment box, please. Place number 4 in the comment box, because this is really important as a form of introspection, as a form of looking into self, deep into self. So beyond that, a way to minimize the way that we feel with ourselves and the way that we feel with others is to begin to understand our day. to begin to understand how we act, how we behave, how we move through the world. So what I mean by that is at the end of every day, spend some time being introspective, spend some time connecting to your heart, spend some time just being with you, spend some time asking yourself questions like, who have I been today? Have I behaved in accordance with my highest values, with my moral standard, with my purpose? Have I treated people well today? Have I behaved in such a way that is painful towards others? Have I behaved in such a way that discredits, disrespects, or isolates others? Have I behaved in such a way that really hasn't allowed me to be the best version of myself? How has my day been today? Have I laughed? Have I smiled? Have I been happy? Have I been angry, and for what reason? Beginning to be introspective. You see, yes, we can deal with rejection when it comes, but a preventative model of living life is so much more powerful than a curative model of living life. And what I mean by that is that instead of reacting to life, if we practice very specific, particular daily practices, we have an opportunity to face life with a far greater zest and courage, and a far greater integration, not only a brain integration, but a heart, mind, brain, body integration. And that becomes deeply empowering for us and for those that are in our lives. Imagine for a moment that those that are in your life are able to benefit from you being a discerning, strong, connected individual. Now, we're not perfect. No one is perfect. And it's okay to not be perfect. It's about the intention that we hold and the ability to act in accordance with that intention as often as possible. And when you are able to act in accordance with that intention as often as possible, and you commit to that intention of being inclusive, of being introspective, of being true to yourself, of openly communicating with yourself and with others, of holding yourself to a particular standard, being present to yourself, to your needs and the needs of others simultaneously. And that's what I call selfish selflessness. And when you're able to do that, that behavior becomes you naturally. That behavior allows you to express the fullness of yourself. And of course, those around you benefit tremendously from that, like tremendously. Now, sometimes we are going to fail to meet the expectations of others. That's just a reality. Now, expectations lead to disappointments. That's also a reality. I always favor preferences as opposed to expectations. They are far more fluid, and they allow us to have a growth mindset, what psychology calls a growth mindset, where we are, and even this is a very stoic approach to living life, but where you're able to, one of the principles, or one of the tenets or the areas of stoicism is to look at life and say, okay, life has thrown me a curveball, life has hurt me, life has upset me, life is very difficult at the moment. What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this situation? How can I become a more grounded version of self? And coming from that perspective there, that really, really allows us to grow, and allows us to be more profound versions of self, and of course allows us to connect to our own innate wisdom and learn along the way at really rapid rates as well. So people are going to reject us because of their own personal prejudices, their own values, their own upbringing, their own interpretation of reality, their models of reality, their belief systems, the way they view the world, based on a series of also expectations of how they view the world. So talking about, referring to those situations where someone else has a certain expectation for you, and that we won't always meet up to that because there's potentially a misalignment of values or belief systems. Like a simple example is a child wants to follow a particular career path, and the parents say, no, you have to do this, you have to be this person in society, and the child says, no, I don't want to be that person. And if the son or daughter of the child pursue their dream, potentially because of the rigidity of the parents, and their belief systems, they will reject their child. They will reject their behaviors. And that's tough. And similarly in relationship, when similarly in relationship, when we are a particular character type. So for example, you could be an introvert and your partner crucifies you for being an introvert and not being an extrovert. Yeah. That can be a problem, and we will feel rejected. And it's because we are not communicating, we are not connecting, we are not really understanding who we are and how we're moving through the world. And if you can relate to any of those rejections, those forms of rejection in partnership, because your partner is crucifying you in a particular way for not meeting their standards, or you even do that, you've done that perhaps in your past. I know I have done that many times, consciously and unconsciously, to my partners, and it has been so harmful and hurtful for them. And at the time I couldn't see it because I was stuck in my own stubbornness and my selfishness and my own fears, but I couldn't see how I was hurting people. And of course it's also been done to me, and we do that because we have these unconscious agreements with ourselves and these unconscious expectations that we place on others. This becomes a problem. It becomes a really deep problem for the way we relate to ourselves, the way we relate to our loved ones. And we then begin to distance ourselves from those that we love. We begin to distance ourselves from those that we actually care about. And so the relationship begins to break down. Now, sometimes we need to understand that rejection can simply just be an incompatibility of values, beliefs, or even personality types between people. We need to take it personally. So we need to understand that as well, that we're not always responsible per se directly for rejection. So this is a scenario where rejection may occur because people disagree or they have very differing life choices. They just simply have different opinions, lifestyles, or personalities. Now, what happens in this space is that those ideals, those ideas, those opinions, those lifestyles, they're really non-negotiables within each individual. And they will break down the relationship, they will break down, and the relationship will suffer tremendously. So understanding that, it really assists us in then being more aware of the people and the partners and the beloved that we choose to bring into our lives. So again, when we really strip this back, it comes down to knowing self. It comes down to being present to self. So all you can really do here is accept that someone else is rejecting you because of their expectations of you. Again, it's not really personal. It's often due to someone's inability to accept you for who you are and where you are in life and the space that you occupy. And of course, they are entitled to that choice if that's where they are in their own growth pattern. And accept that this is generally their issue, not yours. Now, this does not mean that you do not look at yourself. You are not introspective. You have to be introspective, because as the old saying goes, to some degree, it takes two to tango. And in this context, we are playing a role in the rejection that we are experiencing, whether it be through our own belief systems, our own patterns of behavior, or the way we interpret the world, whether our view of the world is narrow or broadened. We have to understand that, yeah? Now, it's not always easy to recognize rejection, and if there's something to learn from rejection, it's that rejection is merely a consequence of our own or someone else's unmet expectations as a starting point, a very simple way to put it. Of course, when we layer that rejecting or being or feeling deeply rejected, and even rejecting comes down to expressive, deep fears that are experienced within the individual that can be deeply, deeply harmful and hurtful. Now, on that, I'd love to hear where you have all experienced that deep fear before, where you perhaps have experienced rejection, and how have you dealt with that? I know so many people that have experienced rejection and then have really gone within themselves. They've withdrawn from life. They have withdrawn from themselves. and they have ceased to fully engage in the beauty and the wonder in life because of fear of being rejected again, because that pain is either so strong in that present moment or it has brought up a tremendous amount of pain and trauma from the past. So if you're willing to share perhaps what you've experienced around rejection, how you responded to rejection, that would be wonderful. I'll kick this off, I'll kick this off and we'll go from there. So for me, and there's still patterns of this healing, which is really interesting to observe. If someone disagrees with me or just disagrees with my own ideas or my belief systems or even the models of reality, I can at times take that very personally. Now remember, we often teach what we need to learn the most. So this information that I'm imparting, this wisdom that of course is not fully my own, is something that I'm learning from in the present moment deeply. So, and I'll take that personally and I'll feel like it's a personal attack. Now, these are old behavioral patterns. These are old programs or scripts or tapes within me that in the greatest part I've dealt with tremendously, yeah? And in doing so it's like this hypersensitivity. And when I trace that back, I really look at my formative years and I look at the way that I've interacted with my primary caregivers and the way they've interacted with me. And of course, I've been very blessed to do extremely deep work on myself. I understand my attachment style, but also understand certain dynamics, and also not only from a psychosocial, psycho-emotional perspective, from a deeper spiritual perspective as well. So feeling really blessed that I've had the opportunity to do that. But having to understand and come to terms with, hey, jump out of the ego for a moment, because it's not people that are rejecting you. They're just not in alignment with your ideas, and that may scare them or that may cause them to behave in a particular way. And I'm not my ideas. My ideas comprise or make me who I am, but I'm a part of who I am. But that hypersensitivity at time, but I am not that fully. I take ownership of that, of course, but we can be in flux. Remember, we are plastic beings per se, so we can transmute and transform the way we look at life, yeah, in so many different ways. So knowing that it's a consequence of someone else's expectations, and the distinction comes in much clearer when we develop a very profound self-awareness about who we are and how we then affect others. Either way, understanding the causes of rejection can assist us in removing the intensity of the rejection experienced. Because what happens is we drop into a place of heart. We drop into a place of empathy and compassion. And we begin to shift the focus, not being solely on ourselves, but also being on others, also being on their pain, on the pain of others, on the pain of what others experience, yeah? We then connect. Connection's huge. Connection is everything. Well, not everything, but connection and meaning is so important. We strive for that in our lives. We need that in our lives. Like, we deeply need connection and meaning. So let's speak to what does it mean to be rejected in love? This is one of the hardest areas to be rejected in romantic love, in erotic love, eros. The suffering that comes with this type of rejection is deep. It's considerably more difficult than most other types of rejection experienced in various other social circles. Now, interestingly, many people tend to love and desire those who aren't as passionate about them. And that's probably a conversation for another time. And it seems like being rejected at times, or merely the fear of being rejected, makes us more passionate about what we can't have, making us suffer even more. And of course, the word passion is intimately connected etymologically to the word suffering. So we look at these patterns and we ask ourselves why, and how that then also affects who we are, yeah? But when you first realize you're being rejected, sometimes you're unable to speak You're unable to actually move and you become paralyzed. Like physical symptoms may even begin to occur. You may feel nauseous, you may not be able to sleep, you may not be able to concentrate and focus, you lose your ability to be present, and your overall emotional state really becomes hindered. Now, of course, the intensity of these negative emotions will gradually fade and they will pass. And you will learn to enjoy life again, but, excuse me, these feelings can imprint in us. Now, the less connection we have to self, the less understanding we have of who we are, the more we lose an ability to be authentic. And we distance ourselves from actually learning how to deal with rejection. And how to deal with rejection is so important. So the first step in dealing with rejection is knowing that every state that we experience is impermanent. States are just states. They're in constant flux. It will pass. And reminding yourself of that is crucial. Now, being with the rejection, after you've established that idea, being with the rejection, being with the feelings and the emotions that rejection conjures up, is so important for your own growth, for our own growth, for our ability to deal with rejection and pain in a meaningful, transpondent, connected manner. Now, when we stay and remain with our feelings, we grasp the fullness of the wisdom of that feeling. And that becomes completely empowering because then we are able to move through and beyond those feeling states. Now, sometimes we're experiencing very deep level. Now, if you can resonate with that, by the way, please place number 5 in the comment box. If you can resonate with the power of being present to your emotions and to the rejection, but also knowing that the rejection is impermanent. The rejection is very, very much impermanent. Now, next, how do we deal with the pain of rejection when we're moving through those emotions? Knowing that it's a phase, knowing that it's impermanent, knowing that we need to be fully present to our emotions, how do we then move through it in a way that allows us to broaden our understanding and connection to rejection? Physical activity, embodiment practices, mindfulness practices. Move, play team sports, go for a run, go to the gym, practice yoga, meditate, be mindful, practice attentive practices. Begin to fill your experiences in your day up with experiences that are meaningful to you, but that also give you joy, that also allow you to experience fun. It's not to remove the sadness of rejection or what it's conjuring up. It's to help balance. It's to help create harmony and homeostasis within yourself. That's your power. And when you do that, you are able to gain greater insight into each of those emotions that you're experiencing and feeling. And that's really powerful. Now, next is being mindful of our self-talk, because when we fall into a state or a phase of feeling deeply rejected, what can happen is our self-talk, our mind chatter, becomes deeply negative. And this is really challenging to do because we begin to blame ourselves, we begin to criticize ourselves, we begin to say, why am I being rejected? What have I done? I'm not good enough. My behavior, no, no, no. Everything's no against who we are. Be kind to yourself. Practice empathy and self-compassion. Observe yourself overanalyzing. Gently draw your attention to something outside of yourself that is productive, constructive, and healthy. And what I mean by that is gauge your self-talk, gauge the way you communicate with yourself, but also choose to focus on experiences that are healthy, that where you can be of service to others, where you can be of service to your own path and to your own journey as well. For example, volunteer work is a perfect example. For example. So learning something new, that leads us to learning something new as well. Learning a new skill can be challenging. In addition to the obvious benefits of learning a new skill, it helps us heal by focusing our energy on learning something new. So the associations we make with the rejection that we're experiencing, with the emotions, the flux of emotion that we're experiencing with rejection, we can marry that up with the excitement of learning a new skill, and we begin to cope better. We begin to cope with greater efficacy with the rejection and the pain that's being brought up. And we also are creating new opportunities for ourselves, and we're mixing with new people as well. And this is really, this is important, yeah? Important for our own growth. And that leads me, of course, to spending time with new people. But understand that life is a journey, life is a process. Life will bring us challenge. And in that, especially in our relationships, especially in our intimate relationships. So communication here is key. Learning to communicate with yourself, learning to communicate with others is so important in order to assist us in healing and gaining realization and wisdom and insight into our own states. And if you can resonate with that, please place number 6 in the comment box. Now, what I mean by that healing, what I mean by that ability to connect to self is you have to know yourself. You have to know where your boundaries are, where your sticking points are, where your edge is. And you can only know where your edge is when you begin to challenge yourself. So when you're experiencing these fears, the greatest challenge you can give yourself is to be with yourself in these fears, yeah? And Natalie says, I definitely found physical activity helped me. I took up MMA back in June, and the discipline of the practice and the training really helped me get over a breakup that still had a hold on me a year and a half later. Best decision made. Awesome. That's wonderful, Natalie. It's beautiful to see as well. And as long as you're still being present to your pain and present to those feelings so you can learn and grow from it, the physical activity is not a distraction. Remember, everything's intention. Not everything, but a large portion of life is intention. If you have an intention to ignore or suppress or repress, then yes, that's a problem. But if you have an intention to assist you in coping with the intensity of the pain, then fuck yes, immerse yourself in that. Do that, be that, embody that, because you need to in order to be able to move and shift the intensity of the pain. Because if you remain in the intensity of the pain when feeling rejection, that's all you will ever experience is that intensity of the pain. Seek counsel, move towards people that you trust, respect, and revere, and allow people to be of service to you that you do trust, respect, and revere. We need people in our lives that we trust, respect, and revere. We need people in our lives that we can connect to, that are of great meaning and significance to us, to lean on and lean into when we are experiencing challenge and difficulty and pain. And it is these very people that will serve us and assist us in growing and becoming grounded versions of ourselves. So from this perspective, I wish to ask you, do you have people in your life that you trust, respect, and revere? Place number 7 in the comment box. And if you feel you don't, let us know, and let us know why you don't. And just know that this forum, this community here is a place where it's safe to be you, and it's a place where you can find people that you can trust, respect, and revere. So take advantage of that. Be here, be present to that, because that's what this forum and this community, this tribe is about. It's about connection and community. It's about being of service to each other and learning and growing from each other. I know I learn and grow so much when I have the privilege of doing these live feeds, and it assists me in being a far grander version of my own self. So next, in terms of how do we deal with rejection? And before we lay down a couple more reasons, let me come back to the relationship for a moment, because perhaps you have known for some time that your own relationship hasn't quite been in alignment, and at the depth of who you are, you've been expecting a major fallout with respect to the dynamic of the relationship, and you're anticipating feelings of rejection, effectively. Now, what happens is there are various stages to love, and there are 3 to 4 core stages of love, okay? And rejection generally occurs in, let's just say there's 4 stages of love. Rejection will occur in the first 2 stages of love, where it's insecure, it's immature, it's very selfish. There's deep work that needs to be done because we are triggering ourselves and each other emotionally, psychosocially, relationally, in so many different ways. And quite simply put, it is a very, very tough time to be in a relationship, but it can be also a deeply rewarding time if we can move through it and transgress to the next stage of our relationship. So perhaps sometimes you may be bemused as to why your partner is changing or has changed. Maybe you thought that they were just having a difficult time. Perhaps you suspected dishonesty, whatever it may be. Or perhaps you're feeling isolated in the relationship because they are ignoring you. The reality is, you need to be able to communicate what that means to you, to them. And you must understand that in that space of feeling rejected, in that space of feeling disconnected, there is an opportunity for you to look at yourself and learn from the situation. Whether it's reinforcing your values, realigning with your purpose, reconnecting to your partner, learning something about your own resilience and strength and toughness, mental, emotional, spiritual. There's always something to be gained and to be learned. Please, please, please understand that. So sometimes we can experience rejection very, very suddenly, very suddenly. And please understand, and the reason why I mention this is because I want you to feel that what you may experience is very normal. You may be unable to speak. You may feel your nervous system will shake because it's a traumatic experience sometimes to feel rejected. It brings up deep fears. Even the smallest of actions from people towards us can bring up deep fears, traumatic experience that we have had as young people. Your breathing may change. You may become rapid. Your heart rate may accelerate. You may feel stuck, so like your cerebellum and brainstem become very active, and that fight, flight, or freeze mechanism comes in. You freeze. You literally just freeze. Or you may want to run away, and you do that. You may feel sick and ill. You may lose your appetite. Again, we've mentioned this before. Your ability to sleep, to concentrate, to have focus and attention. Your attentive neural faculties begin to shut down and just go within into survival mode. And you may start feeling anxiety, etc., etc. But these symptoms, again, will disappear. Know that they are normal. They happen at times when we experience great levels of stress and anxiety and fear around anything in life, especially around rejection, abandonment, humiliation, feeling emotionally unsafe. So please understand this is very, very normal, yeah? It's very normal to deal with these insecurities in this way, but it will pass. Being present to these feelings is super important in order for us to actually move through them at a quicker rate, at a quicker pace. So there are times when, and I promise you I wanted to speak to, and this is a big topic, so, and I may actually even do this in another live feed, but I want to touch on it this evening because this is really important. So in relationship, you may have an agreement or a number of agreements with your partner, and they may break that agreement. And for example, one of the agreements could be you will spend very particular time together because you both live very busy individual lives, and you'll spend particular time together, but your partner may just keep making excuses or reasons as to not do that. And you may feel rejected. Or you may have an agreement that your relationship is monogamous, and in that partnership, your partner is behaving in a way that is in alignment with infidelity. And you may, again, feel very, very deeply rejected in this space. And you may feel very unsure and very insecure in this space. And then you may begin to have a negative bias towards yourself and start blaming yourself for the actions of the other. Now, the answer is no, 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 no. You must assume responsibility for who you are, and others must assume responsibility for their actions and for who you are. Misusing imagination, allowing your mind to wander and wander and wander, and also blaming yourself for the actions of others is not healthy for you or your own growth. And you have to understand that, and you need to be present to that, because if you are not present to that, what will happen is you will just continue to blame yourself, and blaming yourself is not going to serve you in any capacity at all, and it's not going to fix the situation. So what you need to do in order to start repairing the relationship is go within yourself. Begin to be more self-aware of who you are. Begin to allow yourself to go through the shock, the initial shock of whatever the pain is that you're feeling, and then surround yourself with people you trust, revere, and respect. Journal, express, communicate, go to the source directly. Be in silence and stillness. Give yourself peace. Observe the way you behave with yourself. Be empathetic. Be compassionate. Open your mind and your heart up to yourself and how you choose to move through life. Now, doing this will allow you a greater insight into who you are and how you wish to move through life. Rejection can be deeply, deeply challenging. Rejection can be something that hurts us profoundly. But like anything in life, it is temporary. It is temporal in nature. It will not be there forever. And that's the power of being connected to ourselves. We have a greater faith in who we are. We are generally more present to who we are. Rejection is not easy. I wasn't here to tell you on this live feed that rejection is easy. It's not. It's difficult and it's challenging. And I often say, through the more profound, the more difficult the challenge, the more intense the challenge, the more profound the opportunity for growth. And it's in that space that we are able to connect to our wholeness, that we see that when we are so deeply triggered by these emotional states, these emotional influences, that it's really providing insight into our own being, insight into who we are as people. And with that insight, if we remain with that long enough, we gain a perspective of wholeness. That's powerful. I want to thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, for interacting, for sharing your thoughts, for sharing your wisdom, for being present, of course. Thank you so much. For more videos, jump on my YouTube channel, S.Sifandos. Of course, follow me here on Facebook. But also, if you have any questions, pop them in the comments. And if you want to share a story as well, the tribe will support you. And anyone new that's on the live feed, place new in the comment box. And the tribe and the community will most definitely welcome you with open arms, as will I, of course, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. Please share this video if it's resonated with you, if it's been of any service to you. Please share this video if you feel there is meaning to it and it may impact someone's life positively or in a way that may get them just to think a little bit differently about life. And of course, I will see you again in a few days. Many blessings on your journey, and thank you so much for being here.